I'll go back to this Goldmine article, which I'm quoting so voluptuously as if I remember it so well. But a couple things were in there. Now, this business about, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you were pretty much resigned to not getting in it.
Yep.
But do you feel that that's proper, that you shouldn't, not that they should exclude anybody like you, but as Todd always says, let everybody in. It's a free country.
No, but more than that, I think the whole idea of something called the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame being exclusionary is so anti-rock and roll on the face of it. Yeah. Certainly Pat Boone should be in it, but some of the other people, they get antsy about, well, he isn't rock and roll. Give me a break.
Well, just in terms of numbers of records sold, and I haven't added up the number of million sellers or actual records sold that would be called rock, that we call rock then, or even now would be rock and roll because they're rock and roll songs. But I have a feeling, I'm sure it would be true, that just in terms of sheer numbers of records sold, that I would deserve a place there because there are probably people in there already that never sold nearly as many records.
Well, plus the doors you open for other people and that sort of thing, maybe not necessarily as defining rock and roll, but in helping.
Well, as I said, it was a catalytic thing. It was a transition time, and the original records might have eventually gotten played on pop radio, but they weren't at the time. So something had to happen to open the door and to acquaint a vast audience with a new kind of music. And so that's the function that I and others served. I probably have as much chance of getting on Mount Rushmore as I do in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but it doesn't bother me very much because I understand the rationale.
What about as a kid? Lots of kids we hear about were twisting stations and getting those black stations in. Were you doing that? Or,
I wasn't. No, my brother was, oddly enough. He's not a twin. We're a year apart, but have the same birthday. He used to listen to Southern gospel and R&B all the time, and I was listening to country, not much country, until I met my wife to be, Shirley Foley, who was Red Foley's daughter. I got real interested in country music suddenly, but up to then it was just pop. I liked Nat King Cole and Perry Como, and Bing Crosby was my big idol. And so R&B, no, that was foreign to me, except for the times when I would hear my brother take over the radio and listen endlessly to R&B.
His brother, that funky Nick Todd.
Yeah.
We all remember the one hit single.
Yes, At the Hop and
Plaything,
right.
I'd forgotten At the Hop, and thank you so much for reminding me.
Yeah, right, yeah.
He did the pop version of At the Hop.
Yeah, that's right.
What about Roy Orbison? I know you had something to do with his career.
Well, there was some influence, and Roy said more about it than I ever have. He was in the North Texas area. I went to school at North Texas State and became known on television, radio there.
This prior to recording?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Although I had done 3 little unknown records on a little label out of Nashville called on the Republic label, including my first record of It's Too Soon to Know. I eventually re-recorded that and it became a hit. But Roy was aware that I was doing local TV, and then I suddenly hit real big with records, and I was at North Texas State. He followed me there briefly, and we were on a show together. I didn't know who he was because he was, he's virtually unknown, and I was hitting big, and I came back for sort of a homecoming at my alma mater. I was now in school at Columbia University, but where I graduated. But I came back to North Texas, and it was a big deal, and Roy was on that show as a preliminary thing. And I said some encouraging things to him, which he remembered and said it meant a great deal to him.
Oh, but I've seen bio things about him where he or the biographers claimed that you were manipulating, had some hand in him getting signed by Sun.
Well,
because I interviewed him, and he told me that that essentially Pat Boone was too big a star for them to be hanging out together. That Pat was already very well established, and everybody knew who Pat Boone was.
I didn't think they hung out. I thought he helped them, but apparently
I did not have any that I'm aware of. Sometimes you put in a good word to somebody, and it becomes instrumental, and you don't even know maybe that it had a significant part to play. I remember when I met Elvis first time in Cleveland.
Well,
he had not yet done Heartbreak Hotel.
What month and day and year would that be?
It was
since I know his movements in '56 pretty well.
It was '55. Was it 55? No.
Well, he would have been on Sun.
It would have been, yes. His record deal had just been picked up and taken over by RCA, but he didn't have a record out
Then it would
yet.
be December 55, I think, yeah.
Ah, well then,
Okay.
it was, I think.
Was it snowing, Pat?
It was snowing when I heard him on TV the first time in Hartford, but as you wrote, but we were, I guess, it was a record hop, so school was in, so it was
You and Elvis
early
on a record?
fall,
Or
yeah. And Universal, somewhere there's a film of the two of us on the same show. It was
This is the Bill Randall.
the Bill
Bill
Randall
Randall
film,
thing, W-E-R-E.
I didn't know you were both on that.
Yes, we were
Holy
on,
smokes.
and we met. See, I had my second record, Ain't That a Shame, was on the charts, going up, and I'd had Tutti Frutti. I mean, not Tutti Frutti, Two Hearts, Two Kisses. And this kid from Shreveport came up. Bill brought him up and says, we got a kid that's, I think, is going to be a star. RCA just picked up his contract from Sun. And I said, who's that? And he said, Elvis Presley. And I said, Elvis, I said, I've seen his name on a couple of country jukeboxes in Texas. The term then was hillbilly. He's a hillbilly. How can he be, what do you mean? He says, well, I think he's more than a hillbilly. I think we're going to hear from him. So I was looking forward to meeting him, and I did, backstage.
Did he offer you any pills?
No, in fact,
I read an interview with the Miller sisters on Sun that said that he was quite active even
then.
Even then, yeah.
Well, no, he came in.
And I'm an Elvis fan.
With several guys around him, and he sort of slumped against the wall. His collar turned up, and his pants were too long, and you know that greaser look, which was not in then. I mean, after the movie and all that, the movie Grease, the Broadway show, you'd think that it was in then, but it wasn't. And so this guy looked sort of out of it, even in Cleveland. And so I don't mean that.
This show
the way
isn't
it
carried
came
in
out.
Cleveland.
No, what I meant was, a big metropolitan area, you'd think maybe that was in, but it wasn't. Anyway, I said, hi, Elvis. Pat Boone happened. He says, he just mumbled something. And his shake was real limp, and he seemed real nervous. And I said, Bill Randall says he thinks some big things are going to happen for you. He says, well, I don't know. I said, his head hung down like this, and I thought, man, this guy's such a hopeless introvert. How can he go on this stage in front of all these kids? He told me later, he said, well, man, I was nervous. He said, you were a star. I said, I was a star? My second record was out. I mean, I was just out plugging my records and trying to get something happening. He said, yeah, but you were on the charts. But he was intimidated, as maybe Roy Orbison was, by the fact that I had already gotten a 6-month, a year head start. And it's amazing what that does. If you got stars in your eyes and I remember now being so impressed meeting some of the people I met then. Man, when I met Bing Crosby, of course, he was a star. Frank Sinatra, those guys, I mean, I was tongue-tied. I hardly knew how to talk. And Elvis, of course, when he went on stage, it was a different story. They didn't know what to make of him, that group of high school kids. It's all on film somewhere in a dusty can on a shelf at Universal.
Yeah. Well, in those days when the contrast was laid out to us, Pat Boone versus Elvis, I don't know if there was actually a prize fight or a book or anything by that title, but did you harden in your resolve to be clean cut? Did you think it was all pretty funny? Did you?
I did. I thought it was funny. In fact, Elvis did too. We kidded it between us because he knew he was and was somewhat cultivated the image of the rebel. I mean, he was a big James Dean fan, so, and I was too, but I didn't try to emulate him. But Elvis was single, and I mean, he was a huge hit right away, and he was very exclusive, and he knew it was very commercial to be the sort of outsider, and I called him the iconoclast. He was the idol breaker and the rule breaker. I was the conformist. I was Jack Armstrong, all-American boy, and I was living, I mean, that's the way I was presented, but it was how I was living too. So we weren't kidding anybody. He lived the way he liked to live and wanted to live, and so did I. And of course, there was quite a contrast in the public perception. But I was married and having a child every year and going to college and going to church. And Elvis was asked at the time, he says, you going to get married and settle down and have kids like Pat Boone? And his famous response with that sort of upturn, that little leering grin was, oh, why should I get married? I know, he said, why should I buy a cow when I can get milk through the fence?
Yeah, I've heard that.
And that was the quote heard round the world, and parents and preachers were, totally irate. Yeah, this is what we told you about this guy. But he just meant it as a joke, and And we knew that, he and I together. We knew it. We were just kidding each other.
Well, was there any kind of interaction between you? I mean, he was living in Memphis, you were living out here in New York. I mean, past that initial meeting where you'd get together during the hot years, during the 56, 7,
Yeah.
8 period, was there?
Oh yeah, see, we both, in fact, we both leased the same house at different times in Bel Air. It's called the Villa Piedmonte at the time. And I noticed it's under tremendous renovation right now, just down the hill from where Tom Jones has lived for years. And it was gated and fenced, and I leased it one summer when I was making a couple movies, and Elvis then leased it for longer after I did. But and then I leased another place in Bel Air, and he was living there first in another place, and we would visit back and forth. And of course, he'd come to my house, and my daughters would jump up, and sometimes they'd jump out of the swimming pool and get him soaking wet, and he loved it. And I could tell, I felt at the time, gee, I want this. I want a wife, I want kids, I want a family. I'd go to his house, and he had a couple from Memphis cooking for him, and they'd fix okra and chicken and fried chicken and milk gravy and, you know, all kinds of stuff like that, chicken fried steak, stuff we had from Tennessee, and we'd eat like that together. His guys were around, and he'd send somebody out to pick up his date for the evening.
Wow.
He never went and picked up anybody. He'd send somebody in a car. They'd go pick up the date, bring her over. She'd join the party. After a while, she and he would maybe wander around the house and disappear for a while. And then they'd come back and join the party, and then somebody'd take her home. That was her date with Elvis. And I'm telling you, there were well-known actresses that were delighted to have that kind of a date with him.
Okay, well, I'm delighted to have this date with you today, but it's over. So thanks very much, Pat Boone.
That's what Elvis used to say.
Thank you very much, he said.
So after the show, tell us the actresses' names, all right? 'Cause this sounds like
No, they were well-known at the time.
Okay, well, we're going to go out on the Love Letters in the Sand, I guess, off of the
Okay.
Thistle recordings, and thanks very much. We'll be looking
Enjoyed
forward
it.
to this thing showing up in the MCA reissue in time for Christmas.
It's been a pleasure appearing with you.
I cry each time I saw the tide take